Welcome to the Thursday, August 28th meeting of the Open Space Committee, Town of Hatfield. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight, and we're going to start off with reading of the minutes for the last meeting, and also that will take in minutes that I also recorded for prior meetings. I'll let you know about that in a second. We have a number of items that will take us a short space of time. I'm hoping a relatively short space of time, and then we're going to move on to a discussion of the Trustees Park, which will take up most of our time this evening, I estimate. So let me first of all just formally read the minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting, July 24th. And you will see that I have incorporated notes that Martha Lyon sent out to us after the meeting of July 24th. I thought it was an easier way of recording what happened at the meeting. But initially, this is my own minutes here. Minutes of the Hatfield Open Space Committee's, the July 24th, 2014. The meeting was called to order at 5:30 p.m. Present, Peter Cox, Chair, Rich Abbott, Angelica Dewey, Mark Gillard, Craig Neal. And visitors, Anna Holhut, Jonathan Bardwell, Ken Longstreet, Dick O'Day, and Bill Belden. The meeting was mainly given over to a discussion of Martha Lyon's proposal for redesigning the Smith Trustees Park, which began at 6 p.m. Between 5:30 and 6, the committee met to deal with three other items on its agenda. Mr. Gillard said that Kestrel Land Trust proposed having an organized hike on the Three Bridges Trail on October the 5th. He would contact Kestrel to find out further details. Secondly, the chair announced that the town has paid the $1,500 annual dues for Hatfield's 2015 membership in the Compact for Pioneer Valley Conservation. And number three, Ben Wright of Kestrel Trust has been in touch with the OSC with respect to payment via CPA funds, as endorsed at May's town meeting for the purchase of the White property. A motion was proposed and seconded that, quote, the Open Space Committee recommends to the Community Preservation Committee payment to Kestrel Trust as per its invoice in the sum of $26,021.97 for costs incurred in the purchase of the White property on Chestnut Mountain. The motion passed by a vote of 4-0. Discussion of Martha Lyon's alternative designs for the Trustees Park was the next item of business. Here I have interpolated Ms. Lyon's notes of the discussion. I thought that was, as I said earlier, was an easier way to proceed, but let me read these out. This was the progress meeting, as Martha described it, for July 4th, 2014, and these were the notes that she took, and she's registered the attendees in the same way that I did earlier on with the minutes. Martha Lyon presented a history assessment program and three concept plans for the park landscape. Of the three, the committee and attendees unanimously favored concept number one, which was inspired by the historic circulation pattern in place during the time of the Smith Academy. Design features include, turning the page, 25 by 25 bandstand or pavilion set in a slight rise, 18 inches, at geographic center of the park, with Smith Academy building date stone, gable stone incorporated into the structure setting. Smith Academy site builder relocated to area in front, east side of the bandstand. 4 out of 6 existing lindens on the north side of the park retained and limbed to 15 feet above the ground. Screening of evergreen trees along the west side, the parking lot area. 5-foot wide walkways throughout to this plan. The attendees would like to see the following changes, amendments, and alterations. The bandstand shifted slightly westward to create a larger green space on the east side of the park. Consider a non-elevated site. Do not place the bandstand on a rise. A larger paved area around the edges of the bandstand setting to allow for larger gatherings. The Smith Academy date stones, gable stones, incorporated into the setting of the bandstand. The Smith Academy boulder similarly placed. A water feature fountain, possibly sited near the Veterans Memorial stones. Large, open canopied, possibly flowering trees along the north facade of Town Hall. A varied arrangement and selection of evergreen tree species, along the west edge. Additional trees near the western end of the park to provide a shade. Martha agreed to send PDF versions of the PowerPoint presentation to Rich for posting on the town's website. The Open Space Committee will reconvene on Thursday, August 28th to discuss the final concept plan and preliminary budgeting in further detail. Discussion will begin at 6 p.m. The meeting was adjourned at 7:45 p.m. I and Martha Lyon were the scribes. So can I hear a motion to adopt this and the other minutes which I circulated in electronic form?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Passed by 5-0. Okay. Right, we now have a couple of issues that need to be brought up. Maybe I should just, we can dispose of this fairly quickly. The hike that Kestrel want to do, I know that you were in contact, right, with them. Could you say
Yes.
something a little bit about that?
The Kestrel Land Trust wants to, they've scheduled proposed to us scheduling a hike on the new trail in, up near the reservoir. They did this last year, and I think it came up at our previous meetings, or earlier this year. It is scheduled for October the 5th, is that right?
October 5th, yeah,
Which
October
is
5th.
a Saturday, right? Or is it Sunday? I have to check my schedule. I think it is Sunday.
It's a Sunday.
It's Sunday?
October 5th is a Sunday, from
Okay.
1 till 3.
Yeah.
And I know that we had talked about this possibly being an opportunity to invite people and to really celebrate the trail, but they're telling me that they've got a guide that they'd like to lead along with us on this walk, and they can only accommodate 20 hikers. So whether or not that really works as what we intended it to be, I'm not sure. So I think we could invite specific people, but it seems like they're going to advertise it on their website, so I don't know how many people are going to come. It may be overloaded.
This is a separate thing that we think is separate from the official inauguration
I
of the
guess it's-
trail, which would be later.
Right,
Is
we
that
had
right?
originally talked about inaugurating the trail in the spring, but then with the road work that was
Right.
being done on the reservoir area, we decided, let's put that off. So we thought, well, maybe it would coincide with this date, but now it seems as though this walk is kind of confined to 20 people.
Okay.
So if all the Open Space Committee come and all the Kestrel people come, no one else can show up,
Right.
but anyway.
Okay.
That's so,
All
I
right.
think that it's on for the 5th, but I don't think we should go in and make a big invitation
No.
to people.
Now, I had, and someone I'm hoping is going to correct me on this, I had written down on some notes I'd taken at one of the meetings that we had anticipated having the inauguration on the 18th or 19th, did we? Is that what we said, or was it later in October?
You mean apart from the Kestrel Walk?
Yes, apart from the Kestrel
Oh,
Walk,
okay.
because I was thinking that I actually had put that down
Let me see.
wrongly. Anyway, we'll have to figure out another date if we can't, obviously, piggyback on October 5th.
Yeah, you'd have to check your notes, Peter. I don't have
Yeah.
anything in my calendar.
Well, I
on
wrote
that,
it
but
down, in,
What date
this
do you
is some
have?
way back. I had the 18th and 19th of October.
Okay.
I had read down for, and this was after the meeting we had on April 10th.
Okay.
But somehow there's something in my mind that says that's not actually right. At 18th and 19th, the weekend,
18th and
think those
19th,
plans
Thursdays,
kind of
I'm sorry.
they fell
went
apart
into do it with the Kestrel
with the
group.
Kestrel
Yeah,
thing.
I think you're right.
Okay. So what we have to do is figure out another date on which. on
Either
which
that or we
do
could
this.
do it on the Kestrel date, but we just can't do it with the Kestrel guide. I mean, we could do it later that day
Or earlier.
or earlier, yeah.
Well, maybe we should do that.
Were we not also wishing to have a little bit more completion in terms of the signage and there's no, it's kind of still a rough entrance in terms of,
The entrance is very rough.
yeah.
Yeah.
First 40, 50 feet of it is rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and any formal entrance with, I mean, we had talked at one time about the kiosk idea, or at least
Right.
downsize to the sign, and we don't have that. I'm not arguing for its relative importance one way or the other, but just, we had talked about that.
Right.
Well, it might be better to go there. I mean, it seems to me that if we're going to put a good face on this, it might be better to be more organized and really have it in more ship-shape form.
Well, if we wait for signage, though, we may, we may be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Well, a counter argument to that would be that if we, I'm just looking at back when we talked about this on March 6th as well.
Right.
At one point, we had May 17th as a possible date.
Right.
Right.
But it's still also, from the water line work, it's still rough. And I don't know, I'm just saying, since it exists, I know of people, anecdotally, that have been using it frequently, enjoying it, including some of the citizens who came and, discussed the
with us?
concerns with us.
Oh,
They use
good.
it very regularly.
Well, that's good news.
I'm just thinking, spring 2015, during the winter, we could get the signage issues done. It would be healed of some of the work done with respect to the public works work. And we could do some tidying up, post-winter tidying up, just a school of thought.
What's rough about it, Craig? I haven't been up there. I mean,
It's actually in pretty good shape. Way up on the back loop, there's a tree that has come down, but it doesn't impede hiking. It's a small tree, and you can easily step over it. But as far as just basic cleaning up of the brush and debris is really, and then the trailhead itself, there's a big pile of construction, mud, muck, whatever it is, just plopped right there, right at the trailhead. So you kind of got to bushwhack through the woods a little bit to get to the trail. So, but other than that, it's in decent shape. So.
And I mean, just thinking of the Kestrel thing, is parking going to be an issue?
I wouldn't think we said that was a Sunday?
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be an issue on a Sunday.
So if people
So-
park on Rocks Road
Yep,
closer to Linseed,
right. Or all along that little spur
Yeah.
before you get to Reservoir Road.
right,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Do you think it's just too short to kind of plan a hike? Well, what is it? It's a month and a half, right? If we
More or less.
combined it on that Kestrel date.
I mean, we could do. Steve
Otherwise-
thinks that we should wait longer than that, right?
Well, I'm just sharing that idea. Also, Mark's point is a really good one. It's great Kestrel's support, to all of our other efforts with the watershed and the general partnership that we've achieved with them. But to have it be limited so that a greater number of, we had a nice gathering for the Terry Blunt
Yeah.
conservation dedication. And then if this is a little bit rough looking now, we don't have the signage, and we can't widely invite the townspeople to their town trail, I think feels a little awkward to me.
Well, unless we did it like Craig said, before the hike or after the hike.
yeah.
Yeah, then we
Okay,
could
and
invite
then- okay,
whomever
keep it.
we wanted, I guess. And
Yeah.
I only worry that waiting for signage, waiting for our committee, our volunteer committee, could be time consuming.
And we end up in next spring. We had started off with this spring, you
Right.
know,
I understand.
spring this
I-
year.
No,
and
yeah.
that's the thing that I'm worried about.
I mean, what would it involve? It would involve just inviting, making some invitations, not too formal, but inviting townspeople, people who are involved in supporting the actual passage of the funding for that trail, and that's pretty much it. You know, it's mostly going to be a town, inviting townspeople and the Open Space Committee. So we may end up with, I don't know, we may end up with 20 people anyway,
Right.
you know.
How would that seem to you, Steve? Still a problem?
No, favorable.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, the thing is, it is still, with the plans for additional lengthening it, looping it, maintaining it, and eventually, that we'll have a nice entrance and a nice sign. But that's fine. It is what it is in terms of a work in progress. We all bushwhacked. We all got dirty and muddy and cut. And so let's, I guess
Okay.
we can go ahead. It's a thing of nature. It's being enjoyed now, so I
Right.
don't want to lose any momentum. It would
Okay.
maybe alert people to the fact that it's out there ready to be used.
Yeah, good, all right. Next thing is, can someone get together, a couple of you get together and think about the invitations and think about putting them out?
The only
Someone will say yes. I'll say yes. I'll maybe talk with Mark if he's willing to do that.
The only
Well, I
thing
can
about
give a
my
hand,
day,
too.
my Sunday is that it's, I would probably have to do it after the hike as opposed to before the hike. That's
Okay.
sometimes my Sundays are,
Does that make any difference to anyone else? Could we do that?
the Kestrel one's planned from 1 to 3, so it would be from 3:30 to 5:30 or something.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Right.
Are we getting dark at that point?
Yeah, early
little bit.
October.
Early October?
I think
Still-
I think we'll be all right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we won't get lost, right?
we won't get lost.
All right, so
Yeah.
after Kestrel, all right. Steve, could you sort of?
Yes.
That's great, thank you. Okay, that's settled. Thanks, guys. We're just doing a couple of bits of business. We'll get these done as soon as we can, so we can then go on to what's the real subject of the meeting here. Let me just say that everything went according to plan with Ben Wright and the CR, and you remember that we had asked Community Preservation to release the funds for that, so that's all done. So that's just to let you know. There also, we are going to be part of the Compact for Pioneer Valley Conservation again this year, $1,500 worth of membership fees. And they have, I got something in the mail the other day, I assume this is right, they have been paid by the town, I understand. So
Good,
we're,
wow. So 2 invoices have been paid,
yeah,
the CPC and the,
and that one.
Okay.
Yeah, because I got something, I think it was from Wilma, Wilma Davis. I have to go and check that out. I don't think that's happened. Okay, the other thing that I want to bring to our attention, but I think this is going to take a discussion which we can't have now, at least maybe we can at the end of the meeting after we've done the trustees' park, which is the question about the OSRP. We've got 2 letters, one from Bob Wagner, we got one from the Board of Selectmen. I gave you copies of both of those. And my own view about these is Bob Wagner's is, without fault as far as I'm concerned. But I am concerned about the Board of Selectmen one, and I would like to have at least some discussion on that before we decide, exactly what to do.
I mean, I guess what I would suggest is that it's kind of vague, so we'd be discussing things that we really don't know what they're addressing.
We can
And-
ask for clarification.
Well, I think the point of this is that this is their recommendation letter with the qualification cited above, and I would suggest that we ask Paul, what is, how can we, what do we need to do to get rid of this qualification? What is the wording that
Right.
needs to change? And if, go from there, because it's kind of vague as to what the point is.
Well, if you want to take this up after the meeting, Peter, I did attend the selectmen's meeting where they discussed it, so
Okay.
I have an idea of, I think, what they're referring to, but you're right, the letter isn't specific, so,
I think it needs some shaping up somehow, the letter. So, right, well, I think what we should do is hold off discussion of this for the time being, and maybe at the end of this, at the end of our meeting, we'll get a chance just to talk about it, because I think we need to.
okay.
Okay. Let's go through and see. No, I think that's it as far as I'm concerned. And anything else that we've got, we can bring up after we've had the discussion. Thank you for being patient. Actually, we got through. It's almost just after 6, so that's good. Rich, do you want to
Sure.
take the reins?
So we met in July. A lot of you folks were here. Martha Lyons, our landscape architect, who we selected to come up with some design concepts for the park, presented 3 concepts. So we're here tonight to sort of have me able to look at those for the last month and maybe have people have some more comments. I did get a couple emails, one of which was, I think, from Bob. So I won't read Bob's because he can address that itself, but I do have another email from one of the selectmen, which I'll get into that comments. And I guess maybe, Martha, with your guidance, we could sort of kind of reflect on the concepts that you presented. Maybe we revisit some of the discussions we had last time and any other new comments. The goal would be, at the end of this meeting, that we would, the Open Space Committee would be able to recommend one of these concepts be further developed by Martha. She would come back with a cost estimate associated with that. Whether we get there to that point or not remains to be seen. I also would like, if possible, at the end of the meeting, that we all take a walk out to the park to sort of, talk about certain things that aren't as obvious until you get out there. So if time allows and everyone's on board with that, maybe we can do that also. And so I'll start with an email from Selectman Jeff Boyle, who's writing this not as a selectman, but his personal comments. So these 3 designs were out front in Town Hall here for the last month with, contact information if anyone had comments. So really only got 2. So this is from Jeff. His first point is he prefers option number 3, location of the gazebo beside the town hall, as it preserves the greatest sense of openness in the main space. There is already a barrier on the south side of the wall, which is the wall of the town hall. Siting the gazebo along the town hall location doesn't create yet another one. He also says, like option 2, option 3 provides the largest audience seated in front of the gazebo. Option 1, for example, responds more to how the area is used today in associated sizing and lacks vision as to new future uses requiring more audience space. He agrees that the veteran markers must be in front of the town hall. That the trees along the north side of town hall need to be thinned. It appears as though they block the view of town hall, and that the town hall itself should be more of the main backdrop. He suggests eliminating the straight line center walkway in option 3 and replacing with walkways within both the east and west sections, something like option 1 walk layout, but falling short of the center than option number 1. Although he's not yet convinced, if there is to be a found position off Main Street, not School Street, towards the middle of the walkway mentioned immediately above, or in the previous comment. Can you repeat that? Sure. So although he's not yet convinced, if there is to be a fountain, position it off Main Street, not School Street, toward the middle of the walkway mentioned in his previous comment. As this is a residential area, the design should support daytime and early evening use, but not late night events. Power and lighting will be required for the gazebo, but lighting should be minimal elsewhere, only for safety. And that his last comment was the design should be for low maintenance of grounds, vegetation, and structures. I know, Bob, you sent an email. Do you want to mention your?
The only comments I made were the bigger trees, like Jeff said, should be trimmed. In fact, there's one on Main Street should probably even come down. And the rest of them should be pruned extensively. I'm sure they've never been pruned since they've been put there. And trees should be thinned out just to keep an open space. And the other comment I had was sidewalks. Whatever sidewalk you have leading to the gazebo or pavilion, whatever you want to call it, they should be big enough to handle a vehicle, because whoever uses the bandstand or gazebo, should it be a band or a wedding or whatever it be, they're going to bring stuff up there, and I hate to ruin the lawn if you get the lawn pretty well established.
So that was your 7-foot width?
Yeah, 7 foot width. I mean, a normal pickup is 6 foot wide, so that gives you 6 inches plenty on each side.
Martha, do you have any suggestions to proceed, or should we just sort of go through the concepts again?
Yeah, I think at the last meeting, there was a pretty unanimous discussion or decision, or leaning, I should say, towards concept one. And I would be interested to hear if people have comments about Jeff Boyle's reaction, or if other people had the same feeling about that. Or do people feel like they want to sort of stick with concept one and build from there?
I'll just follow up on one piece he had, or a comment, which was something effective like creating a barrier, option one, perhaps with the gazebo in the middle. And I originally thought that also, and I was more inclined to go on the perimeter, either towards the town hall or towards the back. With the design, seeing the design on paper there, and if we come up with a very open concept of gazebo, maybe one of the slides you had of one of the gazebos, you had a slide, a series of gazebos, one which literally just had pillars and a roof and open down below. If I think of it like that, to me, it doesn't seem as much as a barrier as I originally thought. I still kind of like concept one, but, could be convinced otherwise. But I do like it moved back, which I think we discussed, moving it more towards the parking lot.
Peter, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Martha, it might be nice, because I've heard some comments about, well, we need the most space in front of that gazebo as possible to accommodate, the people that we want to accommodate. And I think it would be good, it's difficult to just look at this plan and to realize what the scale of it is and how many people can fit in the various spaces. I mean, so any suggestions you have to give people kind of an idea of what the scale would be? If we did move the pavilion back a little bit towards the west, I mean, would we end up with a space that could accommodate twice as many people as we do on Memorial Day now? So I think that's what's a little confusing maybe to people who who would like to see scheme number 2 or number 3, because we really want to maximize the space. But is that too much space, or are we designing park that would really be for one event a year or 2 events a year with this large space, is it? So that's, I don't know if anybody else is a little bit confused about the scale of the whole thing. Maybe going out there into the park would actually solve some of that.
Can I make a suggestion on that point? I see that this doesn't all have to be planned out to start from the get-go. This can be a process, and it's cheaper that way, I think. And one of the ways to check out what a gazebo, how, where, would be just for a year or so, maybe even rent a carnival tent or something and have it up. It's really mostly for the summertime. Or rent that for a bit and see how, what's the attendance, what happens. Meantime, starting to get going right away on some of the plantings that really should happen. For instance, there was all this comment about the north side being so pretty and we don't want to change it. Well, I've been in the room upstairs doing Tai Chi in the middle of winter, like January, and the north wind is coming absolutely from Alberta to the entire side of the town hall here. So merely between the windows, sighting, June, I don't know, you had thought of something, but some firs, basically, to act as an environmental barrier for that, warm up at least the north side as much as possible with natural plantings. And the same thing on the north side, where Jeff had made a comment, the west side. The separation from the parking lot is really important, because otherwise your view is a parking lot. And yes, thinning out, but here's another thought I had, which is, Martha found some nice old pictures of the school itself, and I thought, well, not quite like Christo with his gates in Central Park, which were very temporary, but why not recreate architecturally a couple of gates, maybe through those trees, which connect with the walkways, which don't even have to be all in at once. Sometimes the use of the park, I think, will dictate where walkways actually should go. And the first thing is to get use of the park, I think. But anyway, so but the main thing which you can do this year with the DPW is just get rid of that whole middle thing. I mean, it is unfriendly, uninviting. Save the materials, the paving stones, were they, you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concrete pavers are probably not worth saving, but there's some nice ashlar stone in there that can be reused on the site.
Hopefully, so some storage area maybe in the meantime somewhere in the park to keep that stuff, but get rid of that and then start seeing it as a space, as a big open space for the first time. And then gradually move from there. Some stuff has to go. Definitely the prune, that one tree up between the sidewalk and Main Street. That's just totally dead. And yes, pruning the sycamores, I think. Yeah. I think also to think of it in terms of a main area, a main park, sort of, which will develop, but then also start thinking of on each corner little pocket parks. And the first one I thought of is, of course, where Martha had moved the commemorative stones, but that would be built into a fountain. You can look at Florence, look up in Deerfield, and that with benches and room for more commemorative stones. That doesn't have to happen right away either. I mean, I think the water is closest to that area, so it would be nice by then. Think of how could that be used, at least 3 seasons. On the northwest side, I understand from Historical Society, Kathy Gao, that the town hall does need an elevator at some point, which I think if you have to bash through the floors here, could be extremely expensive versus an elevator on the west side, actually using the current entryway as maybe a base, where there's very simply a doorway to the parking lot, a doorway and opening door to the parking lot, and when it gets to the lower floor, the door opens that way as it does to the next floor up. That could also go a third floor.
What are we talking about here? We're working on the park, I thought.
Yes, well, this is the idea of taking the main park and worrying about it only in stages, okay? So
But that's why we're hiring a landscape designer. You don't build a shell of a house and then live in a box and then decide, I want the staircase here, the kitchen there.
No,
That's
that's why
why you design it.
I'm trying to cite some actual additional things that can be planned in at this stage when one starts the main planning of the main thing. And that would be pocket parks. Another one would be for the Capwalk folks to have little chess tables, a little corner where there's some chess tables with the concrete seating, or any place you need immediate shade, you can put a solar canopy over it, PV. The corner, the other corner, I don't know yet, that whatever there, right? It's quite noisy there. But, so I think by renting first some structure that doesn't have to be put in place right away, getting the immediate plantings in, that really should happen, and also the fir trees on the west would be a nice, again, another nice windbreak for when the January winds come. With some gates, and that's, as being out there, I thought, there's lots to do here, but why not do it in stages and get right to the most immediate thing first, within a larger plan?
Well, right, I mean, I think that, getting a cost estimate from Martha of what, everything we want to do is important for funding purposes, because if we're fortunate enough to get it funded at all, we're certainly not going to be able to go back, multiple times. So there has to be some comprehensive plan that is taking into all the.
Well, good, add it all up and then, see what you get and start a little bit, with the most important things first.
Right.
I wasn't able to be in attendance last time, I'm sorry, and I did watch the rerun several times on TV. And a couple thoughts I had were, when we all originally met, for those who did meet back June 2013, we talked about kind of three main categories that Richard had originally talked about: paying attention to the history of the building and the area and respecting that, creating a town common, lots of enlivened use, places to be on it, and a performance function, not unimportantly. And we also talked about how people always do the block, but they never cut through the park because it's a little bit awkward. But people do like to do the hypotenuse of a triangle, and they would cut through the park. And I do think that's why, and perhaps that's with concept one, why you guys wanted to move it, back to the west a bit, because I think that if it could, and you talked about moving it closer to the parking lot area, you could still have a nice, pleasing curve through the park that might even be connected with, some of the kind of arched definition of where the audience is going to be for the pavilion, bandstand, gazebo, and that people could enjoy their walk through the park, be close to the open pavilion, and then with that idea, and Peter, we talked about those pocket parks, and I've talked with Kathy Gow quite a bit, just maybe on the School Street, Main Street corner, having some value-added historical information, having the water feature somewhere would be cool. There would be a reason for people to come there and for people out of town to look at it and say, wow, this is nice. And then, with what Mark was saying about the pavilion, you do have space, and hearing about it, and when Ken originally came. Just people can be around it. So we're not just kind of constrained by people being out on the lawn, but to the sides of it too, and it all, you know, would look pleasant with obviously the necessary buffer to the parking lot. That idea, I know that right now it says here from what Peter Cox had written up that there'd be large open canopied flowers along the north facade of Town Hall. And boy, the north facade looks nice with some of the arched windows and the nice symmetrical ending. It's a building of some interest. And I like that idea, frankly, of placing trees between the arched windows or allowing the architecture, which is very pleasing, to remain while complementing it with some softening, maybe weather helping out types of plantings. But I know when the select board was open in principle to the idea of you know, getting up close to the town hall, I thought that was so cool because I remember Jonathan having a Boy Scout, you know, events there right along town hall, and I thought, what a transformation of the space that was that day. It was so cozy. And you know, there's people that are important here too, the public safety workers. If walking along a planted path of you know, a pleasing planted path from the safety complex along town hall, past the memorial stones to the front of town hall, if one chose to do it. That would just be a cool use. It would be really, you know, using the edge of that park. I think it's a nice space, and I'd love to see something that preserves the nice architectural features of that side of town hall, but also is yet another place to walk. Because I think I know Martha had said, well, we don't want to have so many things in this program that it gets so busied up, and that's a limiting factor. The other thing is, it's not so huge that we can't, you want to use different parts of it. If we could use that edge and this kind of cool corner and have this hypotenuse where you walk through a pleasing curve and you're seeing the gazebo, but you're not stopping, you're walking off over to the stone area and back to Main Street. That's some of what pleased me when we talked back in June, and I do think pushing the quote structure to the west some reasonable amount, maybe, you know, not all the way back to concept two, would be okay. The other thing is if you know, you could have some space behind the gazebo, because there won't be a lot of kids doing mischief back there because they're right next to the police. So how much trouble can happen back there? Yes, yeah.
You don't know how ingenious they are.
I do think that would be, you know, if it makes sense to Ken, where you guys talked about it, I know he was here, and it keeps a lot of openness, but you want to walk through it and go off to, oh, did you see this thing? And Kathy Gow just got funding to do this, and that could, you know, that could preserve some of the look. You could have beautiful photographs. I know Jonathan had talked about maybe doing some roofline elements that captured the old architecture too. You could do both. They would be very complementary. That looked like, oh, and that's the roof line. They look at that. They recreated the roof line on the gazebo. That would all be cool. It would be thematic for the town. Thank you for letting me get in, because I wasn't here. I just wanted to, yeah, okay.
I'm glad you could come, and I appreciate your comments very much.
So, you know, just a couple comments here, maybe get some more discussion going here. So, concept 1 and 2 have, as far as the pavilion, the orientation is towards Main Street, whereas concept 3 is towards School Street. And I just was wondering what folks thought about that, you know.
Concept 1 actually could orient all directions.
Okay.
Right. Ken, you want kind of a universal Right, it would just go,
I was just gonna say the same thing, concept one, you could direct the focus towards Capewalk, or it could be towards Main Street, or it could be towards Town Hall, you know. To me, that one just makes the most sense, it looks more like a park and not a concert hall. The other two just look too much like mini Tanglewood's. You know, it's like, here's the pavilion, here's the lawn area.
because you're right, I mean, even though we all look forward to nice performances there, that's minute-wise gonna be a minority of most of the time, it's a park, people walking through, sitting, enjoying.
And I think the fear with number one is that there's not a lot of space between the sidewalk on Main Street and the pavilion, or the gazebo, but that's a sizable amount of space.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's more than we have now.
You think about how many hundreds of people are there for Memorial Day service, and they squeeze in an area between those two large trees right there on that sidewalk.
Yeah.
And that's 600-700 people.
Well, Ken, you're gonna be retiring in a few years, and we need the space. So, the quartet can be up there playing.
Yeah, I'm not thinking, again, the band's not gonna fit up there. You know, we're looking
Right.
at small combos. We're looking
Yeah.
at maybe a jazz band or whatever.
Well, I didn't mean the band.
No, right.
You're fortunate.
No, I know what you mean, yeah.
Rich, can I just respond to your comment? I mean, concept number 3, I mean, when you go by on Main Street, you're not gonna notice it.
No.
You know, I mean, well, I'm not gonna say you're not gonna notice it, but it's certainly the least noticeable from driving down Main Street,
Right.
concept number 3. As a concept, as a park concept. You would really understand the park concept driving down School Street for number 3. Whereas the other two, Main Street, it would be, and I think Main Street is the important street to, I mean, the park needs to be designed for Main Street foremost more than School Street.
Number one, if you had the bandstand pavilion in architecture like the old Academy, that would look more dominant, like the old building in mock model.
Which face Main Street.
Yeah, but they had gables on both
Right,
sides.
right.
Yeah, so you could get the, you know, have to be a good designer like Mark to put that together, but,
I think a good builder somewhere.
without anything underneath, but,
No plugs.
well, I went there, I know.
Yeah.
I would like to ask something about the facing. Just if in number 1, it seemed that there might be a T with an entryway going towards South Street and Capewalk. I do feel that Capewalk, and over the years, probably those residents are using it the most and have a need for it. And it seems like there's not a single direct, I mean, either they have to walk all the way to the corner, you know. I mean, it wouldn't have to be a 7-foot walkway, I don't think, because, you know, there's just vehicular traffic would not occur there. But some kind of nod to people who would like as short a walk as possible.
Well, let me just talk about that a little bit. Placing crosswalks mid-block is a very dangerous thing to do. And that's why I've removed the one that's on Main Street, connecting over to the center school.
Okay.
Because drivers are just not, they don't anticipate someone's going to be walking out in the middle of the street, except at an intersection. So that's why it's better to put it at the intersection. If there was desire to have something going from Capewalk over to the park directly, I think it needs to be some kind of a crosswalk that's really pronounced.
There's a crosswalk
So-
there.
There's a crosswalk at
Yeah.
both ends at this point, yeah.
Yes, that's
Come
right.
in where she got the walkway, so
Yeah.
I walk there. So
Right.
there is
Okay,
entrance for
so,
them.
so I'm looking
Yeah,
at
they're
number 3,
driving.
you're talking about, more
Yeah.
that they would use the crosswalk. Yeah, I hadn't actually even thought of a crosswalk over the street, but just an entryway into the park that was mid-block. That's how I
Yep.
thought.
They walk across there all the time.
But I mean, yes, if they're
Sure
coming
they
to stage,
do.
you have to take a crosswalk at either intersection, then something either both 1 and 3, give them nice entry points. I would just, you know, it might, to have some sort of accents that show they are meant to be welcoming points for those residents.
I mean, part of this design will be benches when we get to that level, and there'll be, you know, benches closer than where they have to go now, perhaps, you know, at the beginning of each walkway, so that would be one way to, like you said, shorten the walk.
All that stuff of sitting and interacting and being there for a while, I mean, it'd be great for, at some point, someone says, let's go down to the park, let's go down to the common, you know, that would be a good state to be in where someone wants to go there and hang out. I have to, I didn't, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
I would just add to the basketball park across the street, you know, is a nice draw. Why? Because it's got a use, you know, people can use it. So if you think bocce or shuffleboard or chess, you know, etc., that starts making a real use. And citing benches sometimes is absent how people actually use them. You know, they want to either have a conversation with the scenery or with some others, you know, so how they're sited sometimes just out in the middle of by themselves is not inviting. So that can come, you know, it can go in stages. I see this whole thing have a sort of overall plan, get to the plantings which need to start growing, and then see how it gets used, you know.
Right, and you know, if we do go with concept 1, just a thought about that, we may want to think about doing backless benches in spots, because the walkways sort of have a two-directional quality to them, so, but that's down the road.
I was going to say that I didn't really like particularly the look of any of, you gave us lots of pictures, and we saw different structures. And, you know, I think Jonathan's idea is so good and so thematically correct, and also it could be made then to look cool at roof height, gables, et cetera, but then have that openness for looking back to the plantings. It's not obstructing, it's not an obstructed view, it's open through. And people will want to cut through and look at that, and I mean, you could even have some of the arch or the fencing or some other element be around the date stone, have the date stone set prominently with the right type of older fencing. So you could, you know, just make it look neat and historic, and oh, this is special because this was Smith Academy. So everybody almost from other towns saying Smith Academy, they don't know what's it has this mythic element even in its new location. The name's cool, and you know, just it would be unique for Hatfield. It would be special to Hatfield, and you know, it would. It is, as Mark is saying, if you place it in somewhere within the concept 1 context, it would be prominent visually from Main Street.
And I think when you look at concept 1, you see this, in all the concepts, you see the square, the pavilion there, it looks solid, but in concept 1, I would see the pavilion as something you can walk right through.
Right.
So the path would go right through it, and at any time of day, you can walk either diagonal through the park, right through the pavilion to the other side. And then, as for what Peter said, the pocket park idea, at least opening up that north, not the north, but the west screen of trees, opening that a little bit to the playground.
Right, the path.
So you get the view of the playground, and maybe even opening the other corner up a little bit, so you just get the view of not the view of the police and fire department, but, I mean, it's something to expand the view out of the park, you know, and there is a terminus there on all 4 corners, the views.
Well, and to me, it gives a functional interconnectedness. Everybody should want to, if you're working, you might want to have lunch over in the park, so you have a path from fire, police there, from I mean,
Right, there are
the
views
kids,
from
the
other,
kids.
there are views from other buildings to the park.
Right, and you can peer through to the basketball court. The kids come, and the kids, because basketball, and they come, and yeah. And then it's intergenerational, multi-generational.
I have a question about the structure itself, and sort of going a little ahead of what Peter suggested, which I mean, it's a possibility, I suppose, to just, to rent something at first, but I think it's one of the most exciting additions, so I think people, you know, and then this idea of having, I guess, a sort of a replica of the old Smith Academy, is that it's definitely that's what it's speaking to, creating a.
But I just, not to interrupt you, I just want to comment on that. I think one thing that we need to be careful about if we go in that direction, I'm not objecting to it at all, is that you don't want to make it look like a Disneyland structure or something you would see on a mini golf course. So it has to be.
It could be a secondary function.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's a big little windmill on the top. So it needs to be designed very sensitively.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at here.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just wondering if that's exactly what I was saying. Was this supposed to be reminiscent? I mean, if you are going with the square, because originally I admit I had pictured something a little more Victorian, tchotchke-like, but I think it's a wonderful idea to be reminiscent of the school, the building itself. Again, yes, with just like the really salient architectural accents or something. But, and if that were the case, then I would say, again, I think we talked about this boulder that has about the site. Again, I can see, it would make me feel better if it weren't exactly centered, the structure, and we're set back to the west side a little bit. And then if that boulder, again, if there could be sort of a pocket part, which would have more, you know, good renderings, at least of the old school and the history. You use one, if there's going to be a pocket type of, or a niche, some kind, have maybe the boulder simply because the school, hopefully will be evident that, well, won't be evident, the idea of the boulder right in front of it, just seems a little bit of an interruption as to really coming and looking at it. And I don't know how exactly to work out the placement of the boulder, but it seems, I mean, rocks do balance spaces, so it doesn't seem possible at all to find a good spot for it.
It's not just the boulder, it's the cornerstone too, which is massive.
Yes.
And it's not,
Right. That's right now in the central.
yeah,
Central
It's built
area.
into the wall in the central
yeah.
Right,
space.
Yeah, that's a sort of, is that a Goshen stone alcove?
It's either Goshen or
Goshen
Ashby.
stone, but
It's
the
Goshen.
actual stone, I think, I don't, it's not sandstone, right? No, it's a white.
I know, I like, I mean, the alcove shape, I think mirrors the walks, and, you know, whether it's placed, I don't know, it's just yet another crescent. I like the crescent shape is always graceful, I think, and sort of, you know, if that could be rebuilt with the cornerstone in it and the boulder right in, you know, inside the crescent, and then other informational signs there. I think that would be important, again, to reinforce what you're saying about it, that how unique this would be to Hatfield.
So just picking up on the cornerstones, I know in your original sort of thought there, Martha, or presentation, that the pavilion was maybe more of a, had more of a base to it, whatever in the cornerstone would somehow be built into that. And I think what I'm hearing here is that the pavilion would have more of an openness, and there wouldn't be a base to put this cornerstone in. So between the cornerstone and the boulder, and I know Steve's comments about having, you know, a plaque, which, you know, that maybe somehow, and I know you also addressed this too in your original comments about, you know, having sort of the historical piece of it, but not as it necessarily a separate little piece, but to somehow have it incorporated. But I guess I'm sort of seeing it's kind of hard to incorporating it, some of the things we had, so maybe it does end up being a little bit a little section that we could have some of these things at a plaque that wouldn't be hidden, that would be
Yep. Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, I think the idea of building that, you know, gable stone, or whatever you want to call it, into an entry to the park would be great. So maybe it becomes, you know, maybe the stone, the ashlar stone wall that's out there now gets rebuilt in another location, and the wall gets incorporated into it, or the stone gets incorporated into it. I need to think about that a little bit.
Trustees were okay with moving that stone?
Yeah, but we can't really forget that the park is Smith Academy Park still,
Right,
and that's what it's gonna be, so.
right.
So it should be somewhere fairly evident.
It should be
Right,
right
no,
out there
absolutely.
that you walk, or you see, and you
Right.
know what it is. It's not the Hatfield Park, it's
Right.
Smith Academy.
That's perfect for the School Street, Main Street corner there, which currently is undermined by moles and voles, if anybody walks there recently.
I was thinking that too, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, and some of that stone could make a really nice corner there too, with some seating built
Yeah.
in.
You can't forget though, when the town plows that intersection, all the snow goes right on that corner.
Yeah, we'll have to observe a winter.
There's not a lot of.
I know that from the
intersection.
luminarium signs, believe me, I've learned where the plow can't get at them anymore.
And the same thing goes with the west side with our buffer with the trees. You're gonna have to pull them back off the parking lot a little bit because
Yeah.
that's where they push a lot of snow that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
You gotta be concerned about salt, especially on the stone, because they bury the boulder.
Yeah, the boulders,
They totally bury it.
it's like 10, 12-foot pile there every
Yeah.
winter.
Really good points, yeah.
Actually, I thought it'd be good on the west side of the tree planting, that there would in fact be, I don't know what the minimum is for a sidewalk, with a couple of
4
ramps.
feet.
4 feet, yeah. So that would actually both allow for the snow then to get pushed just beyond that. It would also provide a nice level entryway into the park through the gates or whatever.
You know, Martha, I understand what you're talking about, a Disney look to things, but I'm just so confident of people's talent in this town and their good taste. And it's a matter of scale, and I'm looking at, Smith Academy now in this small picture, and what Jonathan's talking about, those gable angles, they're right, they're correct, they look nice, and I think that substantially the look could be tastefully done to correct scale without it looking like a contrivance or bad. It would have to be well rendered, but that's what we would do as a town. I'm sure it would be done nicely. All the comments on the how you would your tree suggestions, and then having pruning of lower limbs to open things up. And these are all just really great ideas. And yeah, I do think a little history area in honor of everything would be good. Keep it far enough away from the snow damage and walk around it too. We don't have to go right up to the edges of things. We could, do spring clean up in that corner and plant some things and make it, and people could, there's a lot of potential there.
Keep the mini golf course just to 9 holes.
Yeah,
You know, we'll just-
where
we'll
does the
just
windmill go?
We'll
I
just go
didn't-
9 holes instead of 18, and I think that would solve it.
To justify the elevator outside, on the west side, I was gonna have a carpet slide for the kids to come.
I just want to talk about trees for a second here, because you had mentioned, and I got confused, I think, the last meeting, but the linden trees are the row, let's say on the School Street side, the linden trees are the inside row, not on the berm.
No, the linden trees are on Main Street.
Right.
Lindens are on Main Street.
Okay,
and-
so on the School Street side, we have the berm, which, what, pear trees on the berm? What,
Bradford pears.
and what's the row behind, right after that?
There's ash on the other side, yeah.
Inside on the, is ash. And Bob was
Okay.
saying in his email that both present a lot of problems, long-term.
Okay,
Pear trees just don't.
they're in rough
last.
shape anyhow.
Yeah,
Mm.
and ashes get disease, they're susceptible.
The ashes are on the way
So
out.
the
yeah.
trees on the School Street side, sort of starting from scratch there,
Yeah,
there's nothing that's intended to be saved there.
Bradford pears when that October 11th snowstorm.
yeah, I bet. they're very weak-limbed.
If I may read for everybody Bob's one sentence, I think all the trees on the School Street side should come out and be replaced with something other than a linden or Bradford pear tree. Is it? Yeah, yeah.
And so then,
They are not a good long-term tree for that particular area.
Both rows have to come out right away. I mean, the first row, totally, the pears can come out first, and that's already opening that, but the second got a little bit more life, I would say, before, as again, you do this in progress steps.
The thing is, you take one row out, you make a mess, clean it up, and then you're gonna come back next year and do the same thing all over again.
Well, the berm,
You're doubling your.
there's two berms, right? So the first one, and then another one is definitely already a hindrance, but I'm saying, yes, you can do it, you know, in stages, and see where you get to.
see, I think that the reality is if we get funding for this, there's a time frame, there's accounting for it, and, you know, it has to be spent. And I don't think we're going to have the luxury that you may have with a, you know, private money that say, well, let's do it in phases.
You can't get it over 3 years, and then the whole ground's
I
ready
mean-
for the whole thing.
But I think if you have a concrete plan that's finally decided amongst the town, then you have a plan, okay, we can do A, then B, then C.
Right.
But you gotta do site clearing first, utilities, get all your structure in. And then you can always add trees. And you might find people that would like to donate.
Yeah,
Or you might have someone like Smith College say, hey, we wanna help out.
We want our name there.
Yeah, you are part of us. I think you gotta have the concrete plan.
Right.
in state.
I would definitely include the pruning, heavy pruning of those bigger trees.
Yeah.
The London plane on the corner and the big maple, and the other big maple which will come down, because,
yeah,
That's dead, yeah.
yeah,
Is that, no,
that's a maple.
so
yeah.
sugar.
Yeah, the one at Town Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's another maple in there too.
This is silver
a nice,
maple, silver maple.
older,
by the-
good, in better shape maple too, though.
Yeah.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
right.
Are we all clear on who's going to have the responsibility to maintain the park once it's all finished and all of Peter's progressive steps have been put into place? Is it clear who's?
I think it's clear to everyone in this room, which is it's the town's responsibility.
I just wanted to be sure we're still on that same.
Right, I think what I would suggest is that when, you know, I think there's some, certainly when a lease is signed, whatever document is signed, that there's some language in there that, you know, the trustees or anyone can point to and say, you know, this is what the town promised in terms of maintenance, and it's not being done.
Should there be a standard of maintenance as well as a delineation of the responsibility for the maintenance? Is that what?
Well, I think the responsibility would be pretty straightforward. I think that's going to be, you know, Article 1, 2, or 3, whatever. I think, you know, the standard should be in there. I think it's what that language is, I'm not sure of, but I think it should be in there.
Main thing is, we can't see, okay, 5 years after the park's done, it starts to get shabby looking, there's this happening, and it reflects on the Smith County trustees.
I agree. I mean,
And we can't have that happen at all. I mean, we have to have, we gotta know it's there in escrow.
well, you know,
whatever.
the one possibility of a thing about is that, you know, the language is such that if the town doesn't do it, the trustees have the authority to encumber the town to do this, but, you know,
Yeah. Thing is, you don't wanna take it over.
not encumber, maybe that's not a right term.
I don't think that's a plans, but.
Well, I mean, I think that what you're sort of, what is the sort of a concrete standard that can be enforced? And, you know, it's not a typical thing that comes up in town.
I would think there ought to be some sort of clear commitment on the part of the town to set aside annual maintenance funds. I mean, so there's a permanent endowment, if you will, which funds the maintenance of the park.
A line item for that.
A line item is a line item, and it can be challenged
Oh, I see what
year
you're
after
asking.
year,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's got to be some way, I'm wearing my treasurer's hat, trustees now. There's got to be some way figured out to assure the trustees that there'll be funding and a commitment to a certain standard of care for us, I think, to be comfortable
And that park's gonna require daily maintenance, trash pickup, it's gonna have weekly maintenance, mowing, you've got monthly maintenance, pruning, with your snow removal. If Ken has a concert, say on a Friday night, the town probably won't send anybody until Monday morning, now you got a mess all over the place. You know, we would like to keep it pristine as possible.
And we all hope that there's gonna be more utilization of this redesigned space, which is a great thing, but it also means there's gonna be more need to attend to it.
Can it be like a Friends of the Park, as there is a Friends of the Library, you know, have that sort of in
Well,
mind to set
that's
up?
been discussed, but, you know, friends come and go depending on who's, you know, has the energy and who's on the committee, you know.
That doesn't work. Over there, I worked at Amherst College, and the Emily Dickinson House has the Friends of Emily Dickinson. And they planted 200 hemlocks over there, with a guarantee that the Friends would prune them up. It's been 4 years, not one has showed up yet. And we're
They themselves are gonna climb up and do it.
No, they're small, they're only 6 foot.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah. But we've had no help at all.
No.
You're probably,
Did Jeff
Some
say,
show up for coffee and tea and donuts, and they have a good time, but no work is actually done.
did Jeff say anything about that when you responded in his email on this?
Uh,
'Cause ultimately, it's gonna come from the selectmen, right?
Right, I mean, I think, you know, in our previous meetings with the selectmen, I think we made it pretty clear that, you know, the town's responsible for the maintenance, but the town's responsible for the maintenance for all different areas of the town, and how well they do depends on funding and availability, and what Sandy's suggesting here is to somehow try to ensure that, which I think is a great idea, I'm just not, you know, what's the mechanism?
A high standard, yeah, no, it's a difficult, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there's a tension here between the town, which wants to keep its maintenance cost as low as possible, and as simple, I mean, the long-term tendency for a park design is for everything to be cut down and to make it as simple as possible.
Right.
But that's not the intention of designing a park. I mean, the town does not maintain a park now in the town, really, does it? So this is a brand-new thing. There should maybe be a long-term endowment or something established that guarantees that there are funds to maintain this park as designed. Otherwise, why bother designing it?
You know, it's gonna have really cost, and not knowing what type of trees we're, you put in flowering crabs, you're gonna have to have pruning every year. And I can't see the town really getting into that.
Yeah, high maintenance landscape.
Right. Even these trees we've got now, we've pruned probably 6 or 7 times in the last 15 years.
You mean the ones in the middle? The
No,
cherry?
those are done, around the,
Firms.
yeah,
Oh,
Right.
the berms. The ones in the middle are pruned every year.
Yeah,
the cherry trees.
no, forsythia and the PGMs.
And junipers and everything and stuff.
I mean, are there precedents for towns establishing endowments to maintain properties? Or would private entities have to do that?
You know, you're saying about these groups coming and going, well, the selectmen come and go too. So it'd be nice to get something in writing from the selectmen showing their support and the town's support for this, so that if the selectmen change, you know, we're not getting 3 new selectmen saying, well, I don't want to do that, you know. But there's some kind of commitment from the town too.
Well, that's why I suggested that it's some wording in the lease that, you know, can address this, that everyone could point to 4 or 5 years down the road or whenever, you know, and maybe that's something about you know, I mean, pruning is probably typically done by a private contract. I can't imagine the DPW doing that, perhaps. So some language like that, within, you know, a certain time frame, there should be private contract and do pruning, you know. It's probably not typical for a lease to get perhaps down there, but that's the only thing I can think of in terms of something that's going to stand the test of time, to be able to point to that said that everyone agreed to this.
The other thing is your gazebo has to need painting every so often, or pressure washing, or,
I think that the town, I think some document ought to be signed that incorporates the design of the park. So that if a disease wipes out half the trees, all of a sudden the trees don't reappear in the park. Or if a storm takes down all of the trees, then all of a sudden we have no design. So that the park as a design, at least as a minimal design, should be documented. And it should be the obligation, or at least the intention, if anything happens, to restore it.
I think also the maintenance would have to be part of the town budget, you know. So it's there every year.
I think the basic sort of, there is a lot of open field here, so presumably within the lawn mowing that the town does, they can do that. If they do it as how frequently they do it, I guess is the question, but when they're doing town hall, they sweep through and do the park. So I think that design helps at least a bit in terms of, allowing the DPW not to stretch themselves too much by doing that, I think the trees or the gazebo maintenance, I think that gets another level that the DPW hasn't been used to doing, nor would they have necessarily the, people to do it.
And I know that it sends things out into a risky area to say, oh, we'd seek out and cultivate relationships of service learning through, Smith Academy high school students or Smith College to take a role, Smith College landscape people to come and be able to maintain some things. So, I mean, it gets to a point where obviously you the trustees, need to and be comfortable with the final language and either say, okay or not. Because all those things could be done, and I think they should be done. I can see a group of Boy Scouts wanting to do it, a nice repainting under, supervision with the right practice. And that some of it is too. I saw Martha, kind of maybe suggesting we don't do a lot of high pruning need things, but everything eventually needs pruning. And, my mother-in-law, just very quickly, my mother-in-law lives in a nursing home. There's a crabapple right out of her house and right out of her window. And I went out a couple weeks ago and just some terrible crossing branches. I frankly immodestly made beautiful cuts right out to the outside edge of the branch collar, just as you should. And then the maintenance guy said, oh, the little work was done. So a week later, they do all these blunt cuts, just chopping, and just it looks wrong, and you know what I'm talking about, Bob. So we could have people come in and do butchering and not good quality, landscape pruning that some of us know about.
Like Jonathan said, I think you gotta have a budget for all that. And, I would also include the lawn mowing, that way you're guaranteed it's mowed every week. Yeah, the town doesn't do any.
Right now, the cemetery, I'm on the cemetery.
Yeah.
And our budget went over to the DPW, which supplies a laborer, 2 laborers, and a lawnmower every 2 years in maintenance through the DPW. So now our cemetery is mowing the town hall and mowing around the fire station and stuff. But you see the difference from what someone that cares about what he does.
Yes.
That's Vince Paninchko, and the town on the big rig, they're just there to mow. Makes a difference, who's there and who's doing it.
That's what that was my point too, yeah, all that, yeah. Well, that's a whole nother category then of concern, that you guys have to be independent of a great plan and a plan that honors the purpose of the park and the history of the park. You want to know that.
That's a big concern of ours, because Martha's going to do a great job designing this thing, and somebody's going to build it and install it, and then for the first year or two, it's going to look like $1 million, and then it starts going down and down, and then 5 years from now, the town says, you know what, we don't need it, it can go back to the trustees.
Yeah.
Now we're stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, Anna, you made that point. You made the point early on about stewardship, maintenance. That what's right. So we.
You can design it, you can plan it, but if it's not maintained, when I was in business, go 6 years later and it's a forest. And they said, what can we do? I said, well, it's kind of late, you know? You know?
So I think that going forward, I mean, the design that Martha has, I think, has kept the maintenance, you know, as reasonable as possible. I think the lease ultimately is, in my mind, one way to address this. There could be other ways which I think we have time to talk about between now and what would ultimately be the trustees signing off on this lease once we have some funding in place down the road. In the meantime, I think, you know, Martha goes ahead with the design. And between then, like I said, and when we sort of go have a signed lease, there's additional discussions or brainstorming of how to sort of ensure the maintenance. And, you know, I'm not, what I was hoping to do, we can decide if we can get to this point here, is that we can tonight recommend that Martha proceed with one of these concepts. And just before we get to that, can you, Martha, just explain to us once what that next step is when you present whatever the concept we choose, what you'll be presenting to us?
Sure. So my understanding is that I'll be coming away from this meeting, hopefully, and I will be taking all the comments that I've heard, and I think people are pretty much in agreement about the things that we've talked about tonight. I will revise the plan, and I'll also illustrate it in a couple different ways so that people can get a better sense of the scale, what it would be like to be inside the park, what it would look like from Main Street coming down, so that you can visualize it a little bit better. And then I also will be doing a preliminary cost estimate, or a budget projection, I should say, to get an idea of, you know, what we're talking about in terms of construction costs. And then I'll come back to you and, you know, we'll look at all of that together. So that would be it.
In responding to the trustees' concerns, have you ever done something where, and I can anticipate your answer to this question, but where you have a kind of a speculative maintenance, yearly maintenance budget?
Yeah, I've designed a lot of projects like that.
Where you have some sense of a maintenance budget, or, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Or maintenance needs, which we can anticipate too, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most successful projects I've been involved in are where you have, well, contrary to what was said, if you have a friends group where there's usually one person who's really driving it, really passionate about it, then that can really make a big difference in how the project evolves and then how it is maintained. And I've been involved in a couple of projects like that, but it takes one really determined individual to keep it going. But I think in communities where they're committed to, you know, taking care of their cemeteries and their parks, this becomes just one of their other projects to work on. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, and I do know what you mean. Once you get, because I know you have these friends, and then I've shown up for work things where you know, there's like 15 people talked about coming to work, but 3 people show up. We've all been involved with those things.
Especially today, and people are so busy. And
yeah, there would need to be someone who just is a bother, who calls and said, no, we're really all meeting at 10.
Right, and also if you're talking about maintaining a landscape, there has to be someone running the show that knows what they're doing and can organize, you know, little friends, volunteers to help out.
Right.
Because they're not necessarily going to know what they're doing. So it's a big, big commitment.
Do you guys think you should go to the selectmen and get a commitment, if it's a verbal commitment, they know what they're
Well,
on board for?
we've already presented that too. So in terms of, I mean, you know, I think for the trustees, everyone would be comfortable, something like that ultimately has to be in writing, I would suggest.
Yeah, no, I agree. But if
We've
it's
already
not-
been to the selectmen and they know that, you know, maintenance is part of this. You know, how big a gap is between maintenance is part of this and what's expected by the trustees, you know, that's the big question. And I'm not so sure that any number of meetings sort of overcomes that. I think in terms of the process, answering this question, there's still sort of time to address it. We're not, the trustees have, until they sign, until you folks sign a lease commitment, then, it's not an issue. We've got the money for this preliminary design, and Martha can do that, which I don't think is affected by the maintenance question. So I guess I'm not sure what it does to us right now to address it with the selectmen again, without specific things that they're agreeing to do. And, I don't know if
I mean, I guess it would just be great to build momentum and everybody likes it and everybody really wants to go ahead, and not for you guys to throw this on the select board in the town at the last minute, but be saying along the way, and we could certainly communicate that again. But there's going to be a part of this, but here's the deal. We want a standard of care, a standard for this, or, because we can say, no, you have to please us. And that's different because this isn't a town project. This is, you're okaying this project for the town to your satisfaction. So, that could just be reiterated that there's been public comment and public planning and satisfaction around this design, the final design, and the potential through whatever mechanism, we'll just say for sake of argument, community preservation action money. But then still you guys saying, but here's the deal. So I don't think that should be a surprise, but you would need to, just say it's a deal breaker. So.
I don't think that in going to trying to get funding for this, that getting somehow a yearly maintenance built into that funding, I would think that would be difficult, whether it's CPA or trying to get some private money, just sort of say, here's what we have laid out, and part of that is annual maintenance. I mean, it'd be nice, but I think that would be...
Jonathan, you know the answer to this question, but funding for the cemetery maintenance, is that a model that could be used to...
That's coming out of perpetual care.
I know, right. So could there be a perpetual care fund established for the park that would in effect provide the same sort of funding as...
Starting with a sum that you're working off of?
Yeah.
I mean, where's that sum gonna come from? You're gonna start with that?
Well, it's gotta come from the town, so
Yeah.
they're funding it forward as opposed to
Right.
funding it as they go.
Well, you know how
So it
long the
becomes a
perpetual care
perpetual-
money took to get up there.
Well, it's a concept.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a way for the town to dedicate the
Working on it.
funding so that the
Mhm.
maintenance is maintained.
True.
That would be a possibility,
Possibility, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
May I ask a question about that? Anna had suggested, well, it had come to be mentioned about certain families that might be able to donate, towards this. In terms of this perpetual care money, it obviously is something budgeted by the town in part? It is part of the...
Well, the cemetery perpetual care is, so when you buy a grave spot for your family, that goes into a cemetery account, and that keeps building interest, and that's what we work off of. And
Okay.
Over 300 years, back when it was $2 a grave, now it's $4.50 a grave. So, it pays for our,
Okay,
Power of
the-
time.
The pot won't be paid per use, so we don't...
but it could be a place where you could donate if you
Right,
wanted
this
to.
is what I'm wondering.
You could send it out to alumni or something to Winston Academy.
Yeah.
Right,
Certain
so maybe
towns,
it might fall something to the open space committee to...
well, certain town departments have a revolving fund, the rec department, the fire department, but those funds typically have come from fees. So, not sure. Can't imagine us having the volume of creating that, there may be some way to collect fees out there, but like someone said, what's the starting amount of money? Where does that come from?
Maybe we, as the open space committee, have to think about really doing some fundraising, and maybe the private sector to start an endowment to, get a principal. Now, as
We need
far as-
we need a fundraiser, first of all.
Yes,
We need,
we would need a fundraiser. Maybe
I think you gotta find out what the town's gonna come up here. You know, until they say yay or nay, you don't know what's going on. Everyone might say, yeah, 10,000, 100,000 for perpetual care starting.
And if the town
You
says-
never know who's on town floor that night.
And if the town says no, then we gotta go back to the drawing
That's where you
board.
go back, yeah, start again.
So, I mean, I think that is certainly, obviously, an area that we need to address. I'm hoping that it doesn't prevent us from having Martha go with the next step, because I don't see that they're sort of in conflict here. And in terms of determining this which concept, I mean, it's kind of unusual. We can vote on it, but I want the trustees to sort of obviously be in on it. So do I get a consensus? People want to throw out concept 1, concept 2, concept 3 to, you know?
I like the idea of number 1 and pushing it to the west a little bit that they talked about.
Yep.
I like that idea.
And also having it an open concept for the gazebo, so that if people are on the sides or even the back, they're not being blocked out. And also having it on ground level, so you don't have the handicapped issue. Everybody can have access to it.
Although you do need to elevate that gazebo. You're gonna have to grade up to it.
Yeah, urban design, it's gonna be square. Round?
I don't know.
Martha?
What-
Is it gonna be square or round or?
Well, I am not designing the bandstand,
Oh,
but,
oh.
but I think there's some flexibility in that. So I think that when we get to that point, I would imagine, you know, in the next phase of this, when I'm doing more of the technical work on, you know, developing construction drawings and so forth, at that time you would want to be working on the design of the bandstand and the pavilion, and it would get incorporated into the landscape.
In this plan, what size, what dimensions basically?
What's shown on there right now is 25 by 25. And I picked that just because I've worked on a couple other projects where the bandstand is roughly that size and they hold concerts in them and that kind of thing.
I'm not gonna hold how many people per, I can, a group,
And Kenny should answer that, I don't know.
Probably 20, 30.
which would be sufficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll hold the grass ensemble.
All the grass on top.
That's
Yeah,
all
so there you go.
that's all that counts.
Right.
Luminarium.
But again, you know, we can be flexible about that as we move ahead. So.
That was only my vote though, so you can ask the other people.
Well, it sounded like everyone's pretty good concept 1, so I guess based on that, I would
Oh, they can't.
move that our committee recommend to Martha that she further develop concept number 1.
I second that, if that's a motion.
That is a motion.
Any more discussion?
I was in
Okay.
Narragansett, and they had a pavilion down by the waterfront, big open park, I don't know if everyone ever saw that. Yeah, but did you notice how they brought actually put the floor level all out around it?
Right.
You know, yeah, expand, so it comes out, and then they tiered down to another one, so it had grade up, and then they had kind of just looped around the back, a handicap ramp. You know, it's very minimal. I didn't. Because I was the only one of 17 that didn't have his cell phone on all week, you know?
Okay, we're going to
Yeah.
recommend,
No, that's right.
Concept 1.
we're going to recommend concept number 1 as the next stage. Yes.
So
Okay.
did you
Yeah.
take an
All right.
official vote?
With the
Yeah,
gazebo
all
moved to
this-
the west, slightly to the west.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, Ken, that is a good, I have not gone onto it, but I have it written down, so we should when we're all
Okay.
thinking that through, yeah.
Develop concept number 1 as the next stage with the gazebo moved slightly westward, right? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
You mentioned earlier you wanted to go outside and kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, do we-
It's getting darker out there. How long you wanna wait?
Yeah.
Can we all,
What do you think about this?
I think if we're going to go, we've got to go now,
That's all
right?
right.
I agree.
So
Watch your
maybe
mics,
that's what
everybody.
we should do.
Watch your mics.